Today I want to talk about cross-border Somalis. These are just Somalis who live in neighboring countries of Somalia, including Djibouti, Ethiopia, Kenya, and depending on who you ask, Somaliland, which some people consider to be its own country and others consider to be part of Somalia. To start things off though, let's look at Kenya. Kenya has roughly 2.7 million Somalis living there. This means they make up roughly 5% of the country's population, but interestingly enough, actually make up the majority of the Muslims who live there. And Somalis can be mainly found in the northeastern province of Kenya, although you can also find certain Somali neighborhoods in big cities like Nairobi. One thing I find really interesting is that Jubaland, which is actually now part of Somalia, used to be part of Kenya, but this area was actually handed over when the British controlled Kenya. They handed this over to the Italians, who at that time were controlling Somalia. Very interesting fact. So the next country I want to look at is Djibouti. Djibouti is a tiny country of just 1 million people, and roughly 850,000 of those people are Somali, meaning they make up 85% of the total population. The Somalis living in Djibouti are mainly concentrated in the eastern part of the country, while the western part is mainly with the ethnic Afar. One thing I find really interesting about Djibouti is Djibouti was the last country on the African mainland to actually fully decolonize, and up to that time, until Djibouti became independent, many Somalis living there actually wanted Djibouti to join the rest of Somalia, but the French kept blocking it and even actually assassinated some political leaders who wanted that. So very interesting. Now we look at Ethiopia. Ethiopia has 6.5 million Somalis who live there, mainly in the Ogaden region. This area is quite large. It makes up almost a quarter of Ethiopia's territory. But given that this area is really sparsely populated, what this means is that Somalis actually only make up 8% of Ethiopia's total population. And unfortunately, this area has had a lot of conflict. There was, of course, the Ogaden War when Somalia tried taking this area, as well as an insurgency in the region that actually lasted until 2018. Finally, we look at Somaliland. Now, I know this is controversial. I have both Somali nationalists who say Somaliland is part of Somalia, and I also have Somaliland nationalists who are also part of my audience who say this is a separate country. But needless to say, this area has roughly 6.2 million people, almost all of whom are Somali by ethnicity, and this area declared its independence back in 1991, and much of the territory has effectively been operating on it as its own country ever since then, whether you agree that's its own country or not. So there you go. These are the cross-border Somalis of the Horn of Africa. I hope you enjoyed this video. I recommend you check out some of my other stuff. If you live in any of these communities or in Somalia itself, please drop a comment. I'm very interested to know what my audience is like. Cheers.